What's up, everyone? Carmen here with Pittsburgh White Shorts, bringing you another deck tech. I am finally back in the States. It's been a month. Had a wedding in Singapore to go to, and then spent about 3 weeks in Japan chilling with our boy Nico over in Tokyo. Did some road tripping around the country, but I'm back. Saekano comes out next week, Saekano Finisher. So I wanted to get a updated bar door deck tech on the books. Going to be pretty similar to the last deck, so we're going to move pretty quick. Just a quick one to get back into the swing of things because I've been out of it for quite a while. So here's the full deck list just laid out. You're going to see a lot of the same cards, a couple new ones here, and even though those new cards are kind of just a few just smattered in there, they do bring up the consistency of the deck, and notably Saekano in English does not have a ban list, so this deck never sort of existed in this level of power in Japan. Whether or not this deck will be able to still stand up and execute a strategy against the very aggressive and high power English meta at the time, for lack of a better way to put it, is to be seen. But if you were going to play it, this is how I would do it. So yes, again, a lot of similar cards, those being the sort of Saekano trifecta of memory cards here that you're going to find in pretty much every memory focused Saekano deck. You have the Error drop search, which is on reverse drop search, and then on play you can give a character 2k. Really important because our level 1 combo has to live to get its full potential and plus, so that extra power is really important. And then of course this card rips cards out of our deck. The Izumi Runner, mill runners are pretty antiquated, but the fact that this card can pay 1, send itself to memory, and does not have to be standing, that will be important for later. And then 4 of the Utaha Shinobu, so when your other lane is attacked, you can pay 1, send this card to memory, and bounce that character that was attacked to hand. We do want a lot of our cards to die, just to go to memory, whether they reversed or go to waiting room or things like that. However, being able to bounce something like the Izumi when we go second, being able to aggressively try field to build stock, which we can then convert into memory, is very important, as well as, if you have an ability to side attack, bouncing back one of your high value targets, or maybe a card that's not supposed to be in the front row, if you're forced to attack with something like a brainstorm or something like that, the power of a memory shinobu effect like this is very important. And this card can get pretty big when your other game character's attacks gains 1,000 power, so it's how you'll beat over things at 0. This the Utaha in combination with the Error drop search, just pumping power at 0, is how you'll quote-unquote fight for board at 0, and then when your cards die, you'll send them to memory. The usual Saekano shtick. We're maxing out at 4 copies of all of these because they are so good at what they do, and they are our main memory generators. By the end of the game, you would like to have as many of these as possible in your memory. We're still going to be running the anti-salvage. It's one of the nastiest things that Saekano could possibly do, even though it does kind of hurt us because we have a door in our deck. The ability to shut down our opponent's early game plussing, if they are a deck that happens to salvage, is very good. It's also a fine card to have, kind of rot in your back row in the early game to tap down for the event, as well as giving your level 0s in front 1,000 power, letting them, continue to maybe crest over some cards at level 1, combos that don't have power cross turn, things of that nature. And then one of the Kato Brainstorm. This is the first part of the change train that some decks don't even run. I like running 1 copy just because this one can costlessly change as an act as opposed to changing at the beginning of your climax phase. So if you have this tapped down for the event or some other reason, or you want to brainstorm twice in a turn, you can do this with 1 slot. You can tap it down, brainstorm, sack it off to change, brainstorm again, or tap it down for the event, sack it off, then brainstorm after thinning a card from your deck and getting a stock. So it gives you some access to some really nasty lines in combination with cards like the Izumi that can send itself to memory or clear themselves from board after being tapped down for the event. Moving on to a brand new card, we have the Kato Runner. It is a runaway runner, a scaredy cat runner, so if there's something across from it, you can move it into an empty slot. This is going to give us 7 going first cards in combination with our Izumi Mill Runner. So that's nice, but also more importantly, when this card is reversed, if you have no red cards in your memory, you can send this to memory. This will be the only red card that will go to memory in our deck pretty much, just because we are not playing the Utaha Salvage Riki any longer. or at least I'm not in this version of the deck. More importantly, at the beginning of your main phase, which is after draw, after clock, you can pay one, ditch one, reveal a climax in your hand, and then salvage a climax of a different color. So that means if you draw or clock into the door, you can pay one, ditch the door, grab the bar. This is very important for continuing to loop our Kato Oboro combo, as that's basically what we do all throughout the game, starting from level 1, basically until we play our finisher. And all we do is make memory, play Oboro, twin drive, and lie. So having a climax swapper, whether you decide to play this one, like I have in this list, or the standalone yellow level 0 error climax swapper, is something that the deck didn't have before. Now that we do, especially one that's going to be static after we resolve it once, we will have it for the rest of the game. Timing can be a little awkward, but the fact that this basically exists as an effect that you have in your memory, it doesn't have to be in your hand, you don't have to sculpt the card, you just kind of have it. It means every door that you draw before you basically get to level 3 to play your finisher can be instantly converted into a bar, provided that you have one in your grave. You can take lines to do this. Saekano compresses very well. Leaving a bar out, maybe over refresh to kind of play into this effect, can be very strong. So we are still playing the Kato Oboro combo, the mainstay of the Saekano strategy. We're gonna make memory, resolve Oboro a billion times, and kind of drag out the game as long as possible. When we play the bar, we get, when this is front attack, this can bounce back, and twin drive. Twin drive can help us not only trigger more bars and trigger doors to plus and then pay them out with successive attacks to continue looping Oboro, as well as give us extra hand, but also in combination with a side attack can help us trigger maybe at least one soul trigger to still deal 2 damage against level 1. Since we don't have Alice in the meta at level 1 right now, this stands a lot more of a chance of actually sticking to the board and getting its plussing effect. Even if our opponent happens to sack into something like triple Kishibe, we can easily field a full board of these with all of our consistency effects at level 0, and then side out versus that triple board, and hopefully at least get, maybe like 1-2-2 with some triggers, as well as getting another bar to loop for the next turn. It's not the best line, but it is, the usual Saekano keep up strategy. And as long as there aren't level 2s popping out at level 1 very often, with either a lot of standby or something like Alice, which thankfully there isn't a lot of right now, Kato can do a lot of work. Still running the pulling an all-nighter to game event. Up All Night is one of the strongest events that they've ever printed, so that you rest 2 of your characters. Those characters can't stand during your next stand phase, and if you rested 2, search your deck for a character, add it to your hand, then choose a character in your waiting room and put it into your stock. So for basically one hand, you get a card back from your deck and then get a stock. So it goes even, searches a card, and then stocks a card. The reason tapping down 2 characters and they don't stand for 2 turn cycles doesn't matter is because you have all these cards that I have listed over here to the left that can remove themselves from the board either at climax phase or with an act, can activate their effects despite being tapped. So this is how you're going to basically cheat resources. You could basically use this to like turbo through your deck. If you have this and an Izumi on your board, you can tap down an Izumi and another card, go get an Izumi. This card pays for itself. So like for just having 1 stock, you can like move quote unquote 9 cards. Plays like that. There's a lot of different ways you can flex this, and I've gone over it quite a bit in our previous Saekano video on the old version on this deck, so I won't harp on it too long. But you can check that out if you're more interested in some of the other crazy things you can do with this card. And then we're running 4 of the Brainstorm, the quote-unquote first part of the change train. There is the Kato level 0 Brainstorm that I mentioned before, but this is the primary first part of the Search Brainstorm, and then at the beginning of your climax phase, you can pay 1, put this into memory, so long as you're level 2 or higher, and put the level assist on the board. That level assist will then later change into your finisher. That is the classic Saekano change train event, and we're not limited by a ban list at all, so we get to run the full thing at full power with all the good memory level 0s. Again, talked about this a lot in our previous deck tech, so I'm not going to get into any more of it here. New card, we have this memory Adachi. Unlike previous red Adachis that are just reverse. This is when red Adachis started to become memory. So you just get that character out of the game basically forever, which is very nice. When it's reversed, if you have 2 or less memory, you can send this to memory. That's not something you always want to do. Saekano does struggle with dealing with very big boards, so you kind of want to have access to your Adachi to play it over and over again. You also don't really want to remove a soul trigger from your deck, considering that Saekano is very light on soul triggers with the way that it plays. You do thin a lot of non-soul triggers out of your deck, but it is lighter on soul triggers than most. That does matter now in current wise. But if you do happen to get this card in the memory, at the beginning of your draw phase, before you clock, you do get to look at the top card of your deck and put it on the top and bottom of your deck. So you get to scry before you clock. Can be a very nice sort of feather to this card if you do get the opportunity to send it. But usually with Saekano, by the time you get to level 1, you're probably going to have 3 memory, or be setting yourself up to have 3 memory with something like a change, or cashing out Izumis to pay out triggered climaxes in the early game, things like that. So you won't have many opportunities to send it. However, again, you probably don't want to send it very much, because you want to be able to recur this card to deal with your opponent's early plays, or maybe standby out 2/2s or things of that nature. Another 3 Saekano staple cards. We have, of course, the level assist that change trains into the Kato Finisher. 1 copy of the Kato early play. This is a 2 or less healer that's also a Shimakai. Pumps one of your other lanes 500 times your other board, so 2k somewhere on your board other than its own lane. It's a fine card. We have another early play option. You could just replace this entirely, but I like having the 1 option to have a healer at 2. Because it's a 2 or less, we do refresh a lot, we do move through our deck a lot, we do generate a lot of memory. So we have the opportunity to, cancel a lot at the top. The opportunities to use this card are fairly limited because of that 2 or less, but I like having the option, especially because we are playing a free fresh counter. This one is the PR. I believe in the West, this was just handed out as a shop PR, similar to how the old one in JP was back in the day. But if you don't have it, there is the red Utaha one that you can get from the set 2 booster. They do exactly the same thing, they're just different colors. So keep that in mind if you don't have access to this, or you missed the shop promo or something like that, or it's prohibitively expensive for some reason. You can just get the Utah version. They do the same thing. Other new card at level 2, also very important for helping you win board, is this Kato. So if you have 2 or more other game characters in your memory, this gets 1500 power and hand on core, so that you can recur it turn after turn. And then when you attack, if the character across from its level 3 or higher gains 6k. That means with 2 or more memory, which is almost impossible to whiff in Saekano, you will be swinging into level 3s at 14k. Pretty good for challenging your opponent's early plays without opening yourself up to anti-change or things like that. And of course, once it gets run over, you can simply hand on core it and go again, considering that Saekano is sort of a loop kind of deck. You get over the 1 lane, snipe your opponent's small lane with an Obro to get your plus while slamming bar every turn. Plays right into that strategy of looping, building memory until we can get our Kato finishers out and start multi-turning our opponent at endgame. This is the new early play I was talking about. It is this Uta. It is a 4 or more on board early play. If all your characters are game, which basically means you're playing a valid Saekano deck, this gets 1500 power and hand on core. And then when this is played on the stage from your hand, you can pay 1, choose a climax in your waiting room, and add it to hand. So this on demand can give you access to your door for your finisher turn, or give you another bar if you happen to not draw one, or didn't happen to draw any door to switch into your bar with your climax swap. You can just pay 1 salvage and go again if you have the board to do it. Also, the fact that it is hand on coreable means you can keep up another larger and 2 soul beater in the mid game in conjunction with the level 3 killer. These 2 cards kind of give you a beefier board in the mid game to sort of bridge that into your finisher, while again you continue to loop over and build memory. Again, you can cut that Kato healer early play entirely and just play 2 of this if you'd like, but I like having the option for a healer even if that window to use it is pretty narrow. Kato Finisher, not much to say here that hasn't already been said. You change train into it, it builds a lot of memory by itself. If you have the full memory condition, it gets 2000 power on your turn. Your opponent can't play backups, and it's hexproof, so their ability to interact with this is very, very minimal. Obviously, on play or on change heal, the best part of the card, considering that you can play these down from your hand and then promote your level assists from other turns, from successive turns up to the front to then pay 1 change and then heal and combo again. And then when it gets a reverse, you can just pay 1 and burn 2. Very efficient finisher effect, considering that your opponent can't interact with it very much, and this gets decently large, especially with the level assist. You should have no problem finding reverses even in the modern meta, unless you are unfortunate to queue into something like Ainz or something like Slime or something like that. But even then, you should be able to crest over Slime, considering that they can't play backups. Again, another card that I've talked to death in the previous deck tech, so won't get too much more into it, but very good card at dragging out the level 3 and 2 turning your opponent. Whether or not you'll be able to do that in the modern meta with the strength and reach of popular finishers, especially when things like crazy icy tails and stuff start running around that have the ability, not the consistency, but the ability to blow out games from mid-level 2, your chances to use this may be slightly more limited, but you do have a lot of compression. Hopefully with your memory compression and everything like that, you will be able to stabilize at level 3 and utilize this on multiple turns. Something that Fine did add is this nice little consistency and off finisher tool. So this is an on play check X, helping us get into our door for our finisher, as well as having a nice off finisher effect. For pay 1, ditch 2 on attack, you can burn 1 and then choose a card in your opponent's waiting room and put it on top of their deck. So this card basically on attack will burn 1 and then stack a card. So if you have a climax down, that's burn 1, swing for 3, quote unquote, for 2, or burn 1 without a climax and then swing for 2, but quote unquote for 1, because you stack that card. Very nice little consistency tool to just make sure we can always have our door on successive turns, making sure that we have our Kato. Again, we can use that climax swap to swap the other way as well. We can swap our bar for our door. So we have many consistency tools to just make sure we always have the right climax at the right time, whether we are looping with our Kato level 1 or going for repeated finisher turns with our Kato Finisher. And that pretty much wraps it up. Again, deck is very similar, only a couple new cards, but it is what it is. Deck is super solid. It's hard to argue with such a streamlined strategy with stuff like all of our memory level 0s. Those cards are not going to change because they are so strong. They are on that restricted list for a reason, along with the event and stuff like that, cheating out resources, stuff of the like. So the core of the deck was never going to change too much, but the few cards that were addition do bring up the floor of the deck pretty considerably. The fact that you can have a lot more climax assurance for going off on every single turn, whether it's at, like, again, level 1 or level 3, for Saekano being infamous for being a deck that if it doesn't slam a climax every single turn, doesn't seem to do a lot. The fact that we have that extra safety net, both in the climax swap at the beginning of every main phase, as well as the EP that can grab a climax and the off finisher that can check X for additional climaxes, adds quite a bit, as well as the additional cards to help us fight for board, not being completely beholden to only the Arary drop search for pumping power to help our Oboro and mid-game strategy kind of contest enough to get us to the end game is a lot better than it may seem with only these 2 cards, the Adachi, the level 3 killer, and as well the Utaha early play. Just these few cards alone make that mid-game a lot less painful in the modern era. And that's about it. It's good to be back. Probably going to put together some sort of like more chill sim gameplay stream where people can ask questions and stuff about the trip. I played quite a bit of Weiss, played in a couple locals, played in some bigger trios events with Nico and Andrew while I was over there. That was a lot of fun. In terms of upcoming events that we are going to, I'll be at White Plains, I'll be at Chicago. Those are the only 2 trios events I'll be able to attend this season, again because of the trip. But if you are going to those, definitely be on the lookout. I wanted to get this out for Saekano specifically because it's pretty low on my priority list in terms of upcoming set reviews, just because of the nature of it not impacting the meta very much. We have stuff like Shauna to cover, upcoming reveals. Hopefully we have some new reveals announced in the upcoming stream, which will be tonight. So hopefully we get some new reveals that are more than worth talking about. Hopefully we got some hype stuff in the chamber. So be on the lookout for that. And with that, PJH White Sports signing off. We'll see you all in the next one.